I'm gonna divide this presentation in three, okay? For the first part, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you good presentation and somewhat design techniques for whatever document that you create. Once you have this narrative, it doesn't matter if you're making a portfolio, even just a simple slide, it will definitely help you, one, become a better presenter, two, a better communicator, and three, a better designer. Okay, I would say that a better communicator has nothing to do with making visuals pretty. Okay, so keep that in mind, that the success of graphic design has most of the time little to do with flashy graphics. Okay, it's always about getting the idea the most simplified as possible into a very concrete message. Okay, so let's get started. I'm just gonna share my desktop real quick because I have a lot of documents. All right, so the first part of this presentation, okay, we're gonna talk about how to do good presentation and even portfolios. So view full screen. There we go. All right. So the topic for this presentation is use damn grit. Okay. I hope that this sticks, especially for those seniors. That if you don't use a grid, like, people will know. Okay, you're at a point that if you have things that are not aligned properly, those are the little nuances that they're gonna piss some people off, right? Especially you're applying for like UI UX jobs, not using a wireframe or a grid, like that's a huge concern. So think about those things. Okay. All right. This presentation is divided into 4 categories. The first one, we're going to talk about value. Then we're going to talk about hierarchy, contrast, and then I'm going to give you my final thoughts. After this is done, we'll jump into some portfolios that we're going to talk about. I'm going to show you some of my work, and then I'm going to show you another BFA portfolio that I've been collecting, which is a great example for you to keep in mind. So the first one I'm going to talk about is value. Okay, value in a sense can mean various things when it comes to presentation. So, for example, did you care enough to write a storyboard of this presentation or whatever portfolio? And I'm going to assume that most of you do not write storyboards for presentation, right? So this is when storyboards are great for you to keep track of all the interesting points in your overall message. Okay, that's when you have to think about, okay, when do I start showing research? At one point in the presentation, should I guide them through this research in a way that makes sense? So especially if you went through different hoops, like you went to the end and they come back to the beginning, like those are the things that you have to simplify it for whoever is looking at this. All right. Another comment for this, UI and UX is the most required set of skills. User-centered design gets you hired. So I did a little bit of research about this, and user-centered design and experience is getting to be one of the most important set of skills, more than designing stuff, okay? So I hope at this point, you start realizing, okay, maybe this is a little bit more important than just making good graphics, right? When you're making this, and I repeat it again, making the storyboard is a way for you designing the whole thing. Okay, all the sketches can be as simple as, and maybe I can show you if I can find my sketchbook. No, I literally just put little squares and it's like, okay, number one, show this. Number two, show this. Okay? Because when you get to that point, you're always capable of seeing every single element inside that conversation. So when you start designing presentations and designing your portfolio, if you don't see the whole thing, it's going to be likely that you might miss some steps. Okay? It shouldn't take long for you to think about whatever you're presenting. You see the narrative, you see the pace with everything that needs to be included. That way you're not overwhelming everyone with like 4 slides that just show information. Okay, this is when you conscientiously make a decision of saying, you know what, I want to make the audience and my whoever representing this to a very specific type of experience. All right. So by thinking this way, having a clear idea in the narrative helps direct the message to the audience. This way, for example, the way that I designed this, it was in a way that I knew I can get your attention from the beginning and kind of lead the conversation to a certain tone and speed. Okay. Another way of creating value, or another reason to create value, is it allows you to connect with your audience through storytelling. This is when, as you can see, my presentations, they don't have fancy graphics. My presentations don't talk, they don't show a lot of information, okay? It's just very targeted points that what I'm trying to do, and this is when I can only try, the results is a different thing, but I can only try to make you think certain things that I want you to think. I am the one that dictates the future of the conversation. Another example that I really like this is, think of as narrative and storytelling as a roller coaster. Okay. If you look at those lines, okay, imagine both of them are roller coasters. Which one you think looks scarier?
I'd say the pink one.
Right, the pink one, because right from the beginning, like it sets the tone. So for example, this is some of the conversations that you can have with yourself of thinking, man, do I really want to just like make them feel really strange from the beginning? Yes, you can. Okay, you don't have to ease things in. Okay, but again, it depends on your audience. So a lot of the times I choose to do this like huge steep section at the beginning by doing either a joke. You can tell a joke. You can tell or show an unusual part about your research. Okay, it doesn't have to be too complex, but there's something that people don't necessarily know too much about something, but you do. This is some of the times that specific first step will dictate the story you're going to tell. So in portfolios, and a lot of people might say this, start with the things that maybe you did a little bit earlier in your career. I would kind of say the opposite, right? Start with your second strong, if not strongest portfolio at the beginning, and then gradually go down and then up. Okay, because if you start with what would be one of your somewhat regular and filler type of projects, that will set the tone for the conversation. So you want to make sure that whenever they open that book, whenever they click on that website, the first thing that they see is something that's going to make them remember. Okay. And this little guide, as you can see, all of these complex themes is a great way to make analogies. Okay. I'm not just talking about it, I'm showing you. And you don't have to do complex graphics to communicate well. It's how you can use very little information to talk about complex things. Then when we get to this part, hierarchy. Okay, hierarchy, you probably heard that word thousands of times. But believe it or not, it's still a very, very important one. Because understanding the hierarchy of your story, and especially of your visuals, dictates what needs to be shown and what doesn't. Okay. So the one thing to keep in mind is consistency is not equal as repetitive. Here's an example of this, right? You have all of your slides and you have similar logos, similar text, similar images. Even if they vary just a little, it feels the same. So when you look at this from a bigger perspective, then yes, like this is when it somewhat feels boring. If someone feels like it just doesn't belong, right? So one of the things that you can do is grab some of those elements and break them apart. Okay. You still have the same three little circles, you have the same images, you have the text, but adding that visual experience just sets the tone very different. Okay. This is a good time for you to understand that a lot of these visuals that you include in any presentation or any portfolio, they're not just limited to title, text, and image. There's a lot of things that people notice. There's a lot of things that capture the audience attention. Like, for example, this one. I'm showing you a consistent element, right? Can anybody guess what's the consistent element in my presentation so far?
It's like those hash marks and like the heavy use of text.
Yeah. But very smoothly, I'm showing you stuff at the top, right? It shows you the name of presentation, which is not obtrusive, but also it has a section that gives you the parts that I'm talking about. So if I'm talking about contrast, right, in this area, or hierarchy, it shows you hierarchy. But the way that I make this presentation is by changing color. I'm changing that repetitiveness. I'm adding another level, even though I have consistent elements. By changing the color, it helps you switch your attention to something else. Okay. Now, there's two numbers or two rules that I would say, if you follow them, you're bound to make good stuff. Okay. The first is 12 by 12. Can anybody guess what's a 12 by 12? Amy.
A grid.
A grid. And why 12?
Because it's a very versatile number and you can use like different portions within that.
Yes. So as you can see, you don't need to know complex grid systems. You don't need to know, man, how many columns you added. Like, stick with 12 by 12. Like, I've been using 12 by 12 for years, because you can do like multiples of 2, multiples of 3, multiples of 4, multiples of 6, like even multiples of 5. Just get 5, 5, 2. Okay. So it is very, very versatile. Okay. And then we have 80-20. What do you think this is for? Okay.
I have a
80-20.
guess.
Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
Is it how much area you're supposed to cover in that grid?
Yes, kind of, yes. So 80-20 is based on a rule of contrast in a hierarchy. Okay. So if you have two elements inside your design, and this is for everything, one of them should be 80% of the screen or of the area, and then the other element should cover only 20%. So out of 100, you have one element that takes about 80%, and then the other elements take about 20%. This is the best way for you to think about contrast. When things are 40-40, 50, like very close inside, there's not enough contrast to look at that hierarchy. Okay. So coming back to this has a grid. I use that grid. I follow that grid. So when things get to one page to the next, right, they all follow into this organized category. Now, the one thing, and you've probably seen this already, grids are great to put text inside in organized ways. When you have graphics, when you have titles, when you have things that are normally big, don't be afraid to put them outside the margins. This is one of the times that if it fits outside, put it outside. Okay. Not everything needs to have a border. Sometimes it's very nice to see things that they just lead off the edge.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So with this grid and using the 80-20 rule, so you're saying like with your titles or headings of the how to build your name and the hierarchy, what category would that fit into? Is that the hierarchy of making sure that that's at the top of every screen that you're showing? And is that would that be the 20%?
I'm glad you asked that question, because that's exactly the next few slides.
Okay.
Right? So this is where you dictate what goes where. Right? And I'm gonna put Amy on the spot. I loved Amy's last presentation. Like, she did a beautiful job. Like, the way that she designed the portfolio or the design brief, it's very well organized. Like, she divided every category in their own perspective, like own respective fields, and using only composition. Okay. And it doesn't have to be complex. They can be very simple details, but they just make sense, right? They're not intrusive. Like, Amy made a conscientious choice of saying, I'm going to focus on this, but not on this, because it's not as important. And it worked. So Amy, great job. But the one thing is also, hierarchy should not be static. Like, this is one of the times that you don't want to make everything too different. Okay, when things are drastically different without a reason, it makes the audience a little bit angry. Okay, so think about how can you not be repetitive, but consistent. And consistency can be either through color, through composition, or through visual message. Whatever you decide, that's what you put in the work. Okay. Now this is like a very standard type of composition, all right? Because for the most part, I designed this because of the way that it's going to be delivered. I know that you're gonna be looking this at a screen. I know you have a limited space. So I'm gonna make sure that whatever I wanna show you is I know where you're gonna have the most appropriate, what's it called? Visual output, no. Where I know you're gonna see the most information, right? I know that when I put this into a full screen, there's not gonna be a lot of things like in your way. But for example, if you look this on a print format, then it might be a little bit different. This is going to be a magazine type of print. This is going to be a portfolio where you have full pages, right? So you have to consider all that space because your eyes just dictate, they don't move too much. So you keep the attention in the middle area. But if it's portfolio, especially when you have like those 2 11x17 portfolios that are just massive, right? The span that you have there is huge. So you don't want to make him read a lot of things. You want to make them go quick. Because if they see something that is huge, then definitely that value and that like, I'm gonna steal this from UI and UX design, screen real estate. You want to make sure that the screen or the page real estate is used appropriately. Okay. Here's another example. They don't have to be separate. Like they can be little sections. As long as visually you know the areas that they use. So the one other thing about hierarchy is if you are gonna end up using text, use minimal text. Okay, no redundant information. So what would you consider redundant information is if you're repeating the same visual or the same text in different places. If you think that this is a good way of saying, you know what, instead of having all of this written information about my project, maybe there's something that's consistent that I can just extract from it and show. Now, the hard part will be the avoid bullets. Okay, because the avoiding bullets, one of the first things that you're gonna feel that you need to do, especially in presentations, is you want to talk about different things at the same time. And you don't. You can just talk about specific ones. The reason why I'm putting a little bit more is because of time, right? We're already 35 minutes in. We have a little bit long way to go. But this is a good way to maybe not also use bullet points, right? You can use paragraphs. You can make it look like it's visual information. Then we jump to contrast. Okay, so contrast also means not only contrast in ideas, but it's the next step of hierarchy. Hierarchy, think more in terms of space. Contrast, think more in terms of form. Okay. So with contrast, okay, contrast, think about contrast and visual of ideas. And for example, proper color for unique spaces. This is something that a lot of you don't think enough, I would say. Color has a huge impact. Now, do you see this little color, right? It's like a little nice muted blue, purple blue. But when I jump to this one, it's like, ah, your eyes hurt. Okay. So for example, the environment dictates the color of which you're going to be using. If you know that the employer is going to be looking at this in a computer, you want to make sure that they don't get tired of it. So if you use white as a background, then yes, maybe use the purple. Because as you can see, the purple at the top is a lot softer. It doesn't hurt the eyes. But when you compare that yellow, man, it just like, so from this, that's still a little bit, like a little bright. It's not as bright as this. Okay, so contrast in color does help. Now, I have a rule. Maybe it's, I mean, I might be totally making this up, but if you're going to be presenting in a dark room, you never want bright colors, because it's just going to fill the entire room with light. So you always want colors that are a little bit lighter on the eyes. So, and because there's a lot of light, you want colors that have high contrast. You don't want to work with a lot of, in a dark room, you don't want high contrast, you want like a little bit subtle contrast, because it would still be seen. But on the contrary, if you're working in a very bright environment, right, there's light everywhere, right? You can either do darker colors, and if you do darker colors, then you can definitely focus on the text with darker backgrounds and then lighter tones, or vice versa. But it's still, you want to keep those colors a little bit toned down. Think about how the contrast on the situation, and it's just a matter of you testing it. Like, this is something that I've just thought of years of experience, and I should probably do a little bit more research, like which one works well, but it works. Okay, so I asked Clayton and he agreed. And there's going to be a few suggestions on how you can redesign some of these things. So part of this project was showing research a specific house, right? What's the house? Who built it? When was it built? So as you can see, it's a very balanced illustration, or a very balanced hierarchy and composition. So your eyes tend to go back and forth, right? Because it's a very similar space, and then you read, and then you go to look at the house. So even though this works well on more like a print environment, if you are going to show a presentation or do something about it, you can do something that focuses on the elements that are most important. Okay. So so going back to this, if the house is what matters, then like you can go in and crop pictures. You can go in and show what's important. So that way you keep this slide very memorable. You show what you need. Okay, because if we go back here, there's a lot of information here, but there's also little clues, right? Colonial revival style of architecture, simplify the color craft, aesthetic that Queen Anne embodies. So if you need to show more information and you think it's not enough, then you add a second one. So the second one focuses only of that specific part. Okay, and then you show with, again, very simple graphics. They don't have to be super complex. With very simple graphics, like, you're starting to make this a lot more memorable. Okay, so by showing one, I was like, okay, August G, Theresa, built by J. Jeffers, 1903, and this is what I liked about the house. Okay. Then we keep moving forward. Again, very similar types of composition, right? Very balanced. You show what you need. But what's the important part that I want to show about this specific slide? Maybe this specific slide is just the label. This is some of the good chance for you to think about what you can do with that label. Okay. If you need to put text, then you can put it on another slide, or you can put it aside, or you might not need, like, this is when very short sentences might work. Now, I'm guessing a lot of you have seen Behance portfolios at some point, right? So in Behance, the way they do is they break apart the section. They might have highly graphic areas, but then there's just a little image that is just text, right? It's not intrusive with the visual language. And that's a good way of doing it. If there's a few things that you know people need to know, especially when you're not presenting, then yes, make that shown. This is what a lot of portfolios do. Is on the left side of your portfolio, you have information, and then on the right side, you have your work. But because you have such a big real estate, maybe you need a little bit of both on both sides, right? There's such a big space that combining them might be beneficial, right? Another example, a very text-heavy type of research. So if you have very limited time, very limited space, you can extract the things that you think are more important, right? So instead of reading that, then once again, you focus on the topics that are most important. The house, what house, who was built, and the style. Okay. The whole idea is whenever you're presenting, you always make them think less, make them read less. And how can you remember the information, at least the main points that you want people to remember? Okay. And for final thoughts for this presentation is, there's a few things that are very important, okay, and I'll keep it here. Let the visuals tell the story. This is, once again, the hard part of graphic design. Okay. For those of you that took the A to Z of Wit in graphic design, like is a great example, especially the narrative one. Remember the little dove? That is enough to tell the story. You don't need to have a lot of information. Like, you use very simple shapes and very simple forms to write the story. And the one that's I think it's very important, you only talk about what you show on screen. Okay, this is a very common practice. It's like, well, I did this other thing, and then I had this don't. because what you're doing there is you're making them confused and you're making them think of things that they're not going to remember. So even if your portfolio that should have a little bit more written stuff, only write about what you're going to show. Okay, because if that written description you have, during my research process, I was able to design like different variations of this. If you say that, show the variations. If you write, I traveled to like a very specific town, a place in town, and took a few pictures, show those pictures. That's like a huge critical part because you're just reinforcing that message. Okay. All right. So to keep things short, it's 45 minutes, 40 minutes. Perfect. Okay. So that's it for this part. I do want to open it for questions and comments before we jump to portfolios. So the way that I want to move forward is I want you to tell me some of the things that clicked and some of the things that were like, oh my God, I've never thought about this. Or some of the things that you already knew. It's perfectly fine. Like this presentation and this, whatever we're doing here, 45 minutes, it's a degree. So trying to condense it to 45 minutes was like a little bit of a task, right? But I do want to hear a little bit more about what did you take from this? Like what, at least there's a few points that you can think of saying, man, I think I'm just going to do this from now on. Like this makes a lot of sense.
I think for me, only talking about what I have on screen, I think I talk too much, maybe in the presentations that I've had as of recently, mostly. So maybe I'll help shorten things up quick, make it a little quicker.
Yeah. So yes, and that particular point keeps you very consistent. So you don't have to fill in, you don't have to feel like, man, I have to talk about other things because I don't have enough content. A lot of you, I would say, feel that way. Like you think that you have to fill in gaps or like make a more complex illustration, introduction, or just look like you actually did your research. You don't have to, because you're only confusing everyone. So if you said, I researched basketballs, show basketballs. And don't talk too much about the other process that you did. If you want to talk about it, then at least give a little bit of clues. Right? That helps a lot, because it puts me as the audience into your shoes. So I connect with you a lot better. Okay.
I'll say I wasn't aware of the 80-20 rule. I mean, even though I've graduated, but this is the first time I've actually heard of it. You know, I think that's a good thing because like you said, it's not, I have a tendency as an artist, just as an artist, I know when I was doing like my storyboards, I had everything kind of the same size and everything. And well, Diana had mentioned to me, you got to make something stand out. You know, it's something that has to be the focal point, even with that. But it makes really good sense about the contrast and the hierarchy as well. But it was never told to me in the sense of an 80-20 rule. And I like the idea of, like you were talking about, the colors and being in the different environments, about if it's very, very light, not to use those really bright colors, and, you know, and so forth. And try to use darker backgrounds when you're in bright rooms and so forth. So I think that's a good point for me.
Yeah, that's good. Like the 80-20 rule, I actually got it from a long time ago. I went to this, I actually don't have this mug. It's called the PepCon conference.
Hmm.
PepCon is the publishing and e-publishing conference. So this is where I think I went 2012 to this conference, and it was when like UI, UX, and mobile design was just booming, right? Barely there was some applications that will allow you to do this type of work. So, and one of them was very clear. It's like, if you want to tell a story, it needs to be enough visual contrast. And he's the one that suggested, is like, if you make things 80% bigger than the 20, like than the rest, there is enough contrast. Like you cannot go wrong with that scale.
And just another thing, see, for me, I do more than just the graphic design. So I'm trying to create these children's books. So one reason why I wanted to listen to this also was to see if I could get some pointers as to how to go about creating the artwork with the text. And actually, this has really given me a good idea already about constructing the books. And, you know, like you said, let the visuals tell the story.
Yes. So actually, you mentioned I actually made a children's book.
Oh,
And
what is the name of it?
it's called The Secret to a Good Night's Sleep. And it's actually on sale. It's $5 on Amazon.
Uh-huh.
It's very cute. But to give you an idea, this is how a little bit of it looks like.
Okay.
So one page, like you have your text,
Mm-hmm.
and on the other page you have your illustration.
Okay.
Now I made that choice because a lot of the books, they use the spread as the illustration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on that illustration, like if it's meant to be an illustrative book, then yes, you think about how the spread can be used. And a lot of the times, text should not be neglected,
Mm-hmm.
because the one thing that you have to think of is text is almost as important as the illustrations,
Mm-hmm.
because they're practicing reading.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay? And a lot of the times reading like creates this very important habit, right? So for these illustrations, think about how the message that you want to include has that hierarchy included into the illustration. So that 80-20 rule could apply. So you dictate or you dedicate 20% of that page to the text, and then the rest to the illustration. For example, this book, I made a decision that the steps are one thing, the illustrations are other. So combining them was not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So very clear distinction of those ideas helped. Okay. All right. More questions, more comments before we move forward.
I have one. So when we're creating a portfolio with multiple projects and color schemes and everything, how do we incorporate color that isn't like too much? Do we section it off, or?
We'll get to that. So I'm actually going to show you the portfolio. So let's see. Think about. Okay, so there's a question from Linghua. I keep thinking about how can I apply these rules to my Instagram post. How to keep it consistent, but have some variation to keep it interesting, as the idea I would like to practice in the future. So social media marketing is a very different thing. And that's another conversation that we can have at a different point, right? Because you're talking about a brand, not necessarily about like a very specific type of objective. It's like your brand are your posts. Now, I personally stopped using Instagram and will probably stop using it forever in the near future. Facebook and Instagram will disappear from my life, and I will focus on my website. Like there's a lot of things, but then again, that doesn't mean that everybody should do it. No, like I still know how to do these posts. I still know how to like do color and everything, but Linhua, that might be a different conversation that we can have. Or just look at some artists. Like you can see what they're doing if you find something interesting. Like it's pretty cool. All right.
Okay, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are not doing the social media things, how did you promote your website?
I don't. So this is where it's I'll give you a little bit of my background. I graduated in May, right? But I started applying for jobs in March. Like COVID hit and it's like, okay, I need to look for a job. So because most of my documents and skills were targeted towards academia, I built all the documents towards academia. Right? So when I was not getting answers around end of May, I was getting a little bit panicked because I already graduated. I need to look for a job. I started building all of my documents, all my resume for design jobs. It was like, I started learning Webflow, how to make my website. I started making all of my images that were targeted specific for the creative market, and then bam, I got the job offer here at the university. So I made the decision, I was like, well, I don't think I need to go that route anymore. Like I was lucky enough to say, maybe I'm just gonna put a pause on me promoting my website because I'm at a point that fortunately I don't have to anymore. Right now, websites, I would say at this point in age might be irrelevant because you have multiple platforms that showcase your work already. So you can be a successful designer without a website. If you have a good Behance, Dribble, what's the other site? Like ArtSpace. Like recruiters go to those sites because that's the way that you can be found, right? Like your website is, now it's more for businesses, but not necessarily more for artists. Like unless you're like a web developer and then you want to show like very specific things that the platforms don't allow you to show, then yes. But again, that's another conversation to have. All right. What about the storytelling? I think this is something that I don't know if you necessarily thought that it should be as important, or you put a lot of effort in the other presentations that you've done.
So that was actually something I wanted to mention. I thought that that was such a good visualization that you had of the roller coaster and telling the story. Because I think like I was mindful that like, you know, when you're walking through a presentation, you wanted it to have a flow, but just kind of mentioning like how you're taking people on that journey, I thought was like really clever and kind of struck a chord in me that was like, okay, like more about how they're being entertained by it and digesting that information and less about like just kind of creating a cookie cutter story, I guess.
Because there's no cookie cutter story. And you as communicators, you're the one that dictates that story.
Yeah, I think like I used to, well, I kind of did this a little bit on like when creating things like in InDesign, like I would have on the side, like, okay, introduction, like, okay, logo development, things like that, and just like outline it a little bit beforehand. But now I think that's what I meant by like kind of having it more structured, but now like that kind of busts me out of that, which is nice.
No, like you can definitely make it, like especially this type of research, like there's a lot of stuff that you find very interesting in your research. Those are the things that you can show. Like, and I will guarantee you that making jokes will get your attention, will get everybody's attention. So even though you're not good about telling jokes, you can show the jokes. If people laugh, they remember. So another level of that presentation is like adding wittiness, like trying to be funny always helps. That's a big success of visual language. Right now, like when I got hired for this, I was using memes as part of my presentation. Like I literally put animated GIFs in my presentation. And it worked. It works. Right? Because they connect. Like these little things, they add a bigger level in the narrative. So cool. All right, so it's 2 o'clock. We have time for one more question and we'll jump to portfolios. All right, no more questions. Let's jump to portfolios.
Well, Samuel, I'm going to have to leave because I have another 3 o'clock, but I appreciate all of the information and thank you, other students, for allowing me to participate. You all have a good evening.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
you too. Have a
Thanks
good
for
evening.
coming, Karen.
All right, have a good one. Bye-bye.
Okay. So can everybody stay like around 2:30? Yeah? Okay. So, you know what, just for the sake of this, like I'll show you my stuff and then at the end I'll show you a good portfolio. So you can see what I did for this specific job. Okay. Okay. So for this, like part of the job description was saying you need to submit a PDF with 10 pieces. Yes. So when you have to curate your own work and put 10 pieces, this is when the narrative has to be on point. Because my work is varied. I have a lot of work on a lot of different mediums. So I had to make the choice of saying, what can I show? Or how can I make sure that I cover every single topic of my work or area of my work? So I start with a little bit about me. You know, this doesn't count as a page, I would say. But the next piece is I show a little bit of the style of me creating poster work. Because I have a lot of different posters, a lot of them it's, yeah, good type and image. But out of all of the posters that I have, is like maybe I will curate one or a couple that are most consistent with my type of work. And then, oh, and the most important thing is I made sure that I named everything as art faculty would normally name things. That's like a big detail of if you see an art tag on a museum, that's the way that they're known. They know how to name things. So I was like, I made sure that this was going to be seen by a lot of different art faculty. And so they know the language. Okay. Then I also show not only personal projects, but commercial projects as well. I didn't focus on too many. Like I had a big enough space to maybe just show 2 at a time. So that was one. Then a little bit of more of illustrated type work that I've done. But on this particular one, I changed the color because it fits best with the illustration. This is when I break the consistency. Okay, and the repetitiveness. By adding that black, it just adds another screen that feels different. Okay. Then I do a lot of typographic illustrated work. This is another project that I did in my grad program. They're all hand-drawn using Procreate, right? So this is something that I want to emphasize. So the illustrated part of it and not using computer, it just, like I've heard from so many people, it's like, oh, you use a computer. It's like, no, I drew all of these by hand. And they're like, oh, well, that makes it more interesting, right? So those are the things that you can like enhance. I also design a few typefaces. So the Quick Brown Fox, actually, I designed this font for the book, for the children's book. And then I've done a few others that I just, like I did this for another company in Colorado. And this was just for a beer label that I wanted to make. Okay. Then I show a little good mock-up of the book. Some other projects that I've done, like UI, UX, right? But as you can see, I'm not showing, even though I'm using like, yes, mockups here, mockups here, mockups here, I take the background out. So that way, sometimes it doesn't feel repetitive. So you forget that there's a line here or a section here. Okay. Some logo work. And then I get to my more like contemporary piece, right? This is just graphic works and object works that that I've done before. And then more contemporary pieces. Like most of them more related to typography. Like very conceptual type of work. And this was my thesis work. Okay. So I show this because as part of the packet too is they were looking for someone that knew contemporary art. So that was my gateway in. Right, because they were looking for someone that was not only good at graphic design, like they were in someone that knew this area a little bit different other than just graphic design. So, but as you can see, this design uses a very consistent type of hierarchy. Always showing on the left with information on the right. Okay. Because I knew my audience. I knew that this type of project would be seen by older academia folks who won't necessarily think too much about the design aspect of it, but more about the variation of the work. Okay. If I were to apply to a like a design firm, this will look completely different, like a massive overhaul, right? And it might not even be print. But yeah, there's some of my work, some of the work of the students that I also had to produce. I'll just show you some of the projects and how I, yeah, the student work in my classrooms, like Photoshop classes. I have some typographical work, like poster work, like layout work, typeface work, custom illustrations work, like portfolio work. Like this is a good way of like various projects that I had to create for this job. Okay, pattern work. And a lot of these are from intro to graphic design students. So, for example, I have another, especially with this one, I have 2 posters done by students that were highly political. And that work I sent to another university that I felt was not as conservative. Right? So I even curated my own work to the work that I thought this department might appreciate more. So even that level of like, what I would say, like curation, it helps. Okay, because that's where the narrative comes in place. That's where you kind of knowing the user, you expect like, I think they're gonna enjoy this a lot more. So I show it. Okay. Let's see. I think I have this one. Yeah, this one that I did. So let me go back to the beginning. This is another one that I did before, and a lot of you are interested. In order to make this, I want to do another workshop because this is all done in InDesign. And it's a somewhat easy type of design. I mean, settings to make, it's just, but interactive design requires different sets of different mind, right? Ways of thinking, right? So you think about very small animations, okay? The composition is a little bit different. Okay, you think about a little bit of variations. As like you give them the option of whether they want to look at graphic design, illustration, or photography, right? So if we keep going to the right, okay. You can make it a little more interactive. You give them clues on how to design. You have your page, and then if you want to go back, it takes you back to the home, graphic design, go next, right? You use your screen real estate a little bit different. Okay. The same thing, as you can see, because this one in particular, when I applied, I wanted to have like a good balance of things that I like kind of did as best as I could for my abilities. Because this specific text was a big part of the design, but I still showed the label itself, right? You focus on that. You don't leave it just as a mock-up. So magazine design, book design, like a huge logo library. Illustrations. Like personal projects, etc. But all of this is very easy to make. What's harder is to design them. That's the tricky part. Like you need to remember that technical skills, they're acquired a lot easier than conceptual skills. Those take a little bit longer time. So, okay. And then you have pictures. Yeah. Okay.
For photos and like your portfolio, like you just showed there, because I usually go full screen with like a photo, like with its project and like my past presentations.
You can.
Okay.
I mean, I if I would have shown the whole screen, then I would still have to leave a part. I mean, I can definitely kill this top area and then use the navigations at the bottom.
Hmm.
It's just the way that it worked with this one in particular. But yeah, like faces, like just variation of photo work. Right. But these little things, just, they're all resolved well. Like this is the one that I forget is to put my CV, but it's too late. Because if you want to go to my CV, you have to go all the way to the end. It's like IKEA. We're going to force you to look at the whole store before you can get out. I hate that, and I made that mistake. Okay. So, and the last one, I can just show it. It's this is so you can see your competition. I think this is a beneficial thing to see. Okay. So this is a BFA portfolio, but someone at Colorado State University. This was meant to be a spreads. Okay, so you can see. So even from the start, you can tell that even though it's gray and it's like very, very kind of like monotone, not necessarily exciting color. One of the reasons that was used is because if this is looked at web and in a web format, the gray color makes it a lot softer, and it's contrasting with this type of effect, right? And keeping the 80-20 rule. Look at the contrast of the size of this image and the information. And most importantly, look at these little things. Like this little arrow right here. It's just a small indication of the story of like, look at that. This is another good example of hierarchy. So you got a creative magazines, and then you have your role, and then you have like everything that happened, right? And then it jumps to different examples. Like this is when the consistency works. Like this one only shows like specific spreads that were designed. Like this little detail too, right? The fact that they used this area to talk about the patient on the right, okay, and not necessarily put the information on this side, but focus is like, I don't want to intrude with anything else. I will make sure that you see what I'm talking about. Okay. The way that they did the branding system, I think it's really, really interesting because they applied it into the composition. I thought that was very, very cool because they don't say this is the font that we used, this is everything that we do. No, they actually show you as part of the design. And I think that that was very, very important. Right, also on the right, you can see like process, very neatly organized in details of it because it's a highly detailed image. Okay, and then you have other different projects. Show exhibitions. Right? This the same, the way that they show the structure of everything, of like the branding. I think it's a beautiful example of brand variation. Right? So you have your name, you have your logos, everything just works well visually. And the fact that it's not black. Like that gray consistency, like it just makes it very, very soft. Okay, and even this talks about this talks about that. Another good example of contrast, your best one you show in color, you make it bigger, right? And then secondary ones you can just put on the right by using proper hierarchies still, little number, name, company, like some promotional work. Okay. And one of the nice things is that even these dividers, like they keep your eyes very focused on the areas that you need to see. Like these little details, like help you encompass the information that you need to show or you want to show. Okay. Like brand application, like this is like stages of a animated GIF, right? So it also shows that they can do animations, like poster design. Like this is something that works really well in terms of branding concepts. Because when you show a poster, you have information that you can see some variations or some different application of it. It's always better that when you're showing this, you don't go straight to the end. Okay. And then it's posted in animated title for moments, like it just shows you a little bit more. It doesn't talk about it, it shows it. That's the part that's important. Even though it's a print, like it shows it. Okay. More personal projects. So she did albums for playlists that she liked. So she created a cover for each of the playlists that she created, and it's a beautiful project. Beautiful, beautiful project. And then that's it. So I will tell you that this is some of the competition that you're against right now. And as you can see, even though the projects are well done, a lot of it has to do with the way that they're presented. A huge part has to do with the way they're presented.
So was the student's web or portfolio on a website? And if it is, how did they do it with being, changing with different screen sizes?
Oh, this is not on a website. This was for the BFA portfolio review.
Okay.
Yeah. No, the website actually, that website, let's see it. I think it's very well done.
So this was like you said for a BFA portfolio review, like they only had like a year of experience in graphic design, or like
No, like this is the senior, like graduated.
okay. I was like, we have our BFA portfolio reviews. Like
I have to tell you that they only have 5 classes of graphic design in Colorado State University. 5 classes: Intro to Graphic Design, Intro to Illustration, Advanced Illustration, Intro to Type, and Advanced Type.
So how do they get so many projects out of only 4 classes? Like, do they get to construct their own kind of?
Grit.
No, I mean like, do they?
Yeah, how do they have some stuff? Grit. They just make them. Like
Okay.
the Cicada magazine started her own project,
Okay.
right? Like, let's go back. Yeah, she started this. Let's see. She also had an internship Like this is her own project, like no class. This is her own project. Like she wanted to make a show. This is part of like working with a team. And yes, it does help. When you work on a team, like that's the quickest way to like learn graphic design when you're in college. Again, but all of these are like the other thing is she built her own community, and that's something that is very difficult to do. Like she had very, very localized groups of people, and they all collaborated with one another. And of course, all of these people, they have incredible portfolios because they all collaborated with everything. Especially when you have 5 classes in your program, you make sure that you're with them on those 5 classes. So let's see. If I go back, Cicada magazine, we should see it somewhere. If you find the website, let me know. Let's see, there we go. Okay, you can pick your color. All right, issue 1, issue 2. I can't see. There we go. I changed the color. Like it's just a really simple, well done website. And I think they deleted all the pages, but it showed all the emails. But anyway, yeah, like this student banged on one project, just one. Like that creative magazine, like look at how much they included in the portfolio. And that's perfectly fine. Like you don't need to have a huge variation of portfolio to see of like different work. Like if you have one work that is well done and it covers a lot of things, that's good. It's actually sometimes better, especially coming out of college. Because a lot of the employers know, and I'm gonna stop this so we can have a little more conversation. A lot of employers know that you don't have a lot of projects. But the projects that you do have, they want to see how far you took them. So, and the number one thing that people are looking for is self-driven projects, passion projects. Because if it's a lot just like classwork, it has to be really well done. But these passion projects, they carry a lot more weight. So think about that. Like now that you are close to graduation, okay, especially for next semester, think about which ones can be expanded a lot more. Think about which projects you can just bring to build them to a completion, in a sense. Okay. And not to overwhelm you, but if you want jobs when you graduate, your portfolio needs to be ready around March, April. And it takes a little bit of time. Okay. Okay. Let's open up for comments. because I want to hear your thoughts. I know that this might be overwhelming. You might feel like a little discouraged, but let's take it to a way that you don't feel discouraged. Let's take it from, man, I can't do this, to I need to start doing this, or of course I can't do this. How are you feeling? What are your thoughts?
It's a lot of information to process, that's for sure.
Yes, it's a lot. But even though it's a lot of information, do you feel like this is an impossible task?
No. I definitely have more stuff to do this weekend.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I just want to like pound more stuff out, like just keep going.
And you don't have to like do constant work. That's one of the nice things about graphic design, that you can think things through for a longer time. Again, good graphic design work has nothing to do with how much effort you put in. It's just like, it's truly thinking smart. And as you can see, a lot of those designs, they use good principles of hierarchy, harmony, contrast. They're very simple. They're not super complex, but they're very well designed. That's the difficult part. Okay. So has there any conversation have you seen before how like your graduation portfolio works? Like, do you have to do a show?
It's kind of on like a class by class basis for the capstone. We kind of come together as a class and decide how we want to showcase everyone's stuff.
Okay.
Last year, because of COVID, they did an online like link and then Zoom, but generally it's in the like outside of the fishbowl in the main area.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that when we get to that. So some of the things that you noticed today that like you think you have like a, you know what? I'm gonna be very, I'm gonna make my life a living hell, but I want to do blank. Like, I think I want to have my website done. I think I'm gonna do like a very interactive animation. Like, anyone here today feels like I'm gonna do that?
Yes.
Good. Because again, even if you have that high expectation, like, I'm gonna have my website, even if it's a shitty website, guess what? You have a website. Keep that in mind. Like, that's a big distinction. Shitty websites are better than no websites.
I actually have a online portfolio website, and I have to curate it down in some parts and kind of reorganize some parts. I don't know, would you be willing to like look at it and critique it?
Sure. I most definitely can. Now, I hope that today was very beneficial for all of you. Again, this is something that graphic design, there's some rules that are there to help. But if there's anything that you got out of this, is that good graphic design talks about a very specific message. Like, it's easy to read. It has nothing to do with complexity. It has nothing to do with like gimmicky effects or complex brushes. Like, it's never that. It's things that feel natural, feels like it just effortless. but when in fact it has like hours and hours of work behind. Because again, making these things, you're just gonna get better, and you're gonna work faster. Okay, get it to this point, like it's just gonna take practice. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a secret. Do you know who I stole this style of presentation from? Aaron Draplin. Yeah. Aaron Draplin came to my university like 3 years ago, and I just loved the way that he presented. So what do? Click. And that's it.
That was me screenshotting you this whole time.
Me
I
too.
make phrases, so. Anyway, that's what, and I've been using that presentation over and over and over again. And it works. It works. Stealing works. Right? You all know the difference between stealing and copying, right? Yeah? What is it?
Maybe.
What is it?
Isn't stealing like taking the ideas behind something and then using them in your own specific way, and then like copying is like directly like just like, okay, I'm gonna take exactly that and exactly.
Yes. Like stealing, like if you want to steal my presentations, you have to decide, what do I like about Sam's presentation? It's like, I love the colors, then steal the colors. Right? If you look at someone as like, oh, I love the way that they structure these presentations. Like, for example, I am stealing Amy's composition. Like, I'm stealing the hierarchy, but I'm putting it in my own style. Which I actually have some presentations like that, but it's like, Amy did it better. So it's mine now. Right? Don't be afraid of doing that. Like, this is something that, like, you're gonna have a hard time thinking that you have to come up with original ideas all the time. It's just exhausting. It's literally exhausting. So don't. Right? A lot of the times you go to Behance and you go to like do your visual research, and magically thinking that your brain is gonna like do all of this like neuron conjunctive thinking. Oh, how I know, when it was like, no. You look at 3 things and say like this from this from that, this from this other one, and then you do it. And that's it. Okay. Work a little bit faster, but be a lot more mindful about what you're going to put on paper. All right. Well, I hope it was a good workshop. Okay. I hope I get to meet a lot of you next semester. And my door is always open. So Angie, if you want to send me a link, my email is, I'll just send it to you real quick.
I actually put a link in the chat to you, so I don't know if you got that.
I don't see a link in the chat. I don't see your link. I'm sorry. But yes, or I'll just send it to you and send me the link. Oh, there we go. Okay. Do you want feedback now or you want feedback later?
When you have time. I won't be able to really get to changing things right now anyway, but
That's fine. But yeah, I'll take a look at it. Okay. I'll still send you I'll put in my email for everybody in case you want to send me stuff. Okay. So if you can, Angie, can you send me an email there? Let me.
You betcha. I will do that. Thank you.
Okay. And another thing, use Crystal and Kevin and Casey and Amy and whoever is part of, and I think Tong Yu, you're also part of, and Linghua. They're all of this organization is crucial. Crucial. Like, I'd sadly to say that whenever you have president or treasurer or something, it's just easier to stand out. So get involved. It will be good in the long run. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions before we end?
For portfolio websites, what is the best website to use to build your portfolio?
How complex do you want to get?
I guess to an extent, but I think from what I've been using, like it's not very editable. Like you have to use like a template, and you can't really change the template very much.
So are we talking about Wix, for example? Squarespace?
Actually, Adobe Portfolio.
Okay. So Adobe Portfolio, Wix, Squarespace, yes. They're very easy to use. Okay. Like, I kid you not, when I started applying for jobs, I had to apply for a job in January. There's like, man, I'm not gonna meet the deadline. So I literally, in a week, I designed a Wix website without knowing Wix. So it is very doable. Now, is that a great website? No. And you can all go take a look if you want on your free time. But I spent my entire airplane ride to LA, like planning this website. Like, what do I need to do? Because you need to reformat all of your images. They have to be the exact size. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm just gonna upload my 4,000 by 3,300 dpi image into the website. No, right? They all have to be 72 dpi, 1,500 pixels, et cetera, like everything. So luckily, all of you have Lightroom because you have Creative Cloud, right? So you can do hundreds of pictures exporting of the same folder, the same resolution with specific names, which is beautiful, right? So Wix, Squarespace, yes. If you want something quick and like to show, those are great. If you want more control, more advanced, and this is the part that I'm in right now, you have to learn the tool. And to learn the tool, the hill is very steep. So if you want to get something out there, don't worry too much about your website and work on your Behance, work on your Dribble, work on the pages that are already there to help you. And you save some money by not paying hosts and servers. So
what would you recommend then, like building off of portfolios, if we were looking into doing, like linking it to a shop of sorts, like some graphic artists do? Would you recommend then having our own website or working off of like another kind of provider like Etsy or something? Like, I know Etsy is kind of like that just huge generic example, but
I think that works just fine.
okay.
If you can use a platform, use it. Like, even if you have like your work on Threadless, yeah, like it's saving you so much money. Like, having your own website is a commitment. Like, you have to commit. Like I had to pay this because a lot of the application is like, you need to show is your website. Just like, damn it. So I have to show stuff in my web, and I show stuff on my website, stuff that I don't show for portfolio. So it's not the same thing, right? But if you want a store, then you have to pay for it. And the hosting and the store system is usually, I mean, it can range from like 10 to 30 bucks a month. So do you want to spend that money if you're going to sell like one shirt a year? No. Use the other sites. Okay. At least for now. Okay. Any other questions? No? Well?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
So how many amount of the pieces do you think would be appropriate for the website? Because we cannot put all the stuff on there, right? And the employer don't have that much time to review all as well. So
This is when the experience conversation is important, right? If you have thousands of works that you want to show, you can still put them up, all of them, right? But then you just make them very easy to access them. To give you an idea, instead of having such a complicated structure, you have a menu that has all your work. So right from the start, whenever they open your website, is your latest work. And then the next link is the work before that, and the work before that. So that way you keep that structure just very simple, which is my mistake. If you go to my website, I have photography and illustration and all that, and it's like, I made the wrong choice. I need to design a website that's a lot more streamlined and it just shows my work a lot easier.
So maybe make your landing page just have your work, and then I have like other pages with just illustration and photography as a separate entity through that website. I guess I'd have to show you.
Yes. So, and the website, again, it's something that you can use to highlight your main work, but you use Behance, you use Dribbble to show all of your work.
Right. And I use like Behance to show more of the process and delving into the process of the work. With the website, it's more of just a collective simplified version, I guess.
Yeah, there's plenty of sites that you can look at that shows you a simplified portfolio, but you have to keep thinking that it's not about the content or the amount of content of your work. Again, it goes back to that experience that you want to show, right? If you have six works that are really well done, show those 6, right? Like you don't necessarily have to show an entire library of your work, because what's the point?
Right.
Like I have my typographical work. It's 365 illustrations because it was one every day. Like that's the work. Like that's the whole piece. So you need to see the entire thing.
Right.
But I have to figure out how to put 365. But for example, Wix, it doesn't let me to do that. And it sucks because I have to put different galleries and it breaks it apart. So it sucks. But something like Webflow, which is you pretty much design the site from scratch, it works a lot better. But then I have to pay $60 a month. Right? That's the give or take. But in terms of pieces, at least for all of you that are coming out, use your best ones. Like use the ones that you think have the most potential. Don't show the ones that, like if you want to show ones that you're like, you know what, I can redo this one, it has good potential, redo it. Yeah. So I hope that helped, Tommy. or Joy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Sam, as far as tools and like technical aspect, like, because you showcase a lot of your posters, what tools do you what tools do you use for poster work? As far as like Photoshop and like,
Actually, the ones that you saw, they were loaded in Procreate.
they were made in Procreate. Okay.
Yeah. But I used some elements of Photoshop. I have some Illustrator posters.
Is Procreate more streamlined? Because I haven't used it at all, but from what I've heard, it's easier.
Procreate is a baby Photoshop.
Okay, okay.
That's the best way that I can put it. It's like it's Photoshop, but easier to draw on.
Okay.
But there's a lot of things that Photoshop still does way better than Procreate. Like if I do the same thing if I would have done in Photoshop, I would have advanced a lot quicker. But in terms of tools, you're at a point that technical skills are not a requirement. And that's something that I think a lot of you are scared that you don't know the tools enough. And that has nothing to do with it. So don't feel like just because you don't know the tools well, like you're not gonna be qualified enough. No. You can do all of your work in Procreate and everything is drawn by hand, but you use design principles and that's it. It's the beauty of it. Well-resolved things, they're software agnostic. Okay. All right. Excellent. I love the participation. I hope you got something out of this. Yeah. And I don't know, Crystal, Kevin, anything you say to the group to finish?
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Sam, for taking this on and being excited about this. I know that we have discussed that we're super excited for your part 2 coming up. So just thank you for, sharing your knowledge with us and your time today. First, so important. And then second, super important, thank you everyone else for coming and giving Sam some feedback and all these good questions. It definitely wouldn't have been as fun if it were just us officers. So we have tons of things coming up as well. So if you're not already a member on SPIN, definitely take a peek at that. Join us on there. You'll get all of our emails and you'll be updated with everything we've got going on. So thank you guys. Thank you everyone for coming. I thought this was really fun.
So you mentioned part 2. Is that happening then? Because I wasn't really sure.
If you want it, yeah, I thought that you had said that you would do the second or the third workshop coming up. So if you're willing to do the interactive stuff, I can reach out to you and we just changed the dates on that too. So we can give you the concrete details on that.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Now, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, it might be a lot easier to do it in person because I can show you, but I know that if I show you this, there's gonna be a lot of broken things. Mm-hmm. So, but we'll figure something out. Even if we reserve the fishbowl and we all
Right. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, every other computer, every 3 or 4, however we have to.
Yeah, all of you have laptops, I would say, right? Or something to work with. We can just come and sit and I can just go around and then, hey, this broke. What do I do? And I can show you. Because if not, there's a lot of details that they're gonna be missed. So, but we'll work on that.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, is doing it from, computer all the time and not being face to face. I think that's going to be the struggle. For next year, for next semester, at least for me.
So we can think about that if we can do that. I think it might be fun.
Yeah, and we just had like a really successful headshot fundraiser last Friday. And social distancing and everything went great. And I think we all really missed seeing each other's faces. So I think this is a great opportunity to try to build that back up again.
Okay, yeah, let's plan on it. I'm glad to hear it went well. All right, well,
Awesome.
thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you,
Sam.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Yeah.